Hello, my friends. Pull your chairs in close, because this is a story the elders refused to tell, one stitched together from whispers, old church records, and the nightmares of the few who claim to have survived the aftermath. It's the tale of the Mothers of the Pit, four women whose names still scratch at the edges of New Hampshire folklore: Amir, Vanessa, Madeline, and Julia. They weren't born evil. No evil was carved into them by the hands of society long before they ever reached for it themselves. Amir was sold first. Her village called her cursed because she survived a fever that killed her parents. Vanessa followed soon after, too beautiful, they said, too tempting, and thus unwanted. Madeline was thrown away because she asked questions men didn't like. And Julia was the quiet one, the one nobody remembered even before she disappeared. All four were purchased by the Haldenrich family, the wealthiest estate in all of New Hampshire. The Haldens smiled in public, but behind their manicured hedges and locked iron gates, they ran their home like a prison. The girls cooked, cleaned, bled, starved, and aged far before their time. They slept in the root cellar, dark, damp, and cold enough to freeze spit. That's where they found it. Buried beneath loose stones in the far corner of the cellar was a book, its leather cover cracked like dried flesh. Its pages older than any language they knew. Symbols crawled across the parchment like they wanted to escape, and every night the women swore they heard it whisper. The book called itself the Maw of Tevrash, an ancient demon older than religion, older than human memory, a being who promised power in exchange for one thing: their souls. Now, my friends, don't judge them, not yet. Because slavery does something to the human heart. It hollows it out, leaves it dry and echoing, and in those empty places darkness fits perfectly. They made their pact on a moonless night. Each cut their palm, each spoke the incantation, each surrendered the spark inside them that made them human. And Tevrash rose. The Haldens didn't even have time to scream. What the demon did to them wasn't death, it was something worse. Their bodies were found twisted, their shadows burned into the walls like they'd tried to run from something no mortal eye should ever see. When the demon was done, the four women stood in the ruins of the estate, not slaves, not victims, but something new, something unbound, something hungry. They walked into New Hampshire under the cloak of night, drifting like smoke. The city didn't notice them at first. Why would it? People never notice the broken until it's too late. They slipped into workhouses, into kitchens, into wells, and one evening, as the bells rang for supper, the water tasted just a little bit strange. Metallic, bitter, wrong. By morning, the city was dead. Not dying dead. Bodies in the streets, in their beds, at their dinner tables. An entire city silenced in a single night, as if Tevrash himself had reached up and snuffed it out like a candle. The women walked through the carnage, calm, collected, whispering prayers in a language no living person understood. Their eyes were empty, their smiles small and satisfied, and then they were gone. No one saw them leave, no one saw them die. No one saw them ever again. Some say they melted into the forests. Others swear they became shadows, slipping between cracks in the world. And a few believe they're still out there waiting, watching, seeking places where the forgotten and abused cry out for vengeance. So if you ever find yourself near the old ruins of New Hampshire, listen closely. Sometimes on windless nights, you can hear four women whispering beneath the earth, calling out to Tevrash once more. And if you hear them, run, my friends. Run while your soul is still yours. Hello, my friends. You remember where we left off. A dead city. Poison in the wells. Four women walking through the silence like queens of a graveyard. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more disturbing. When the sun rose over New Hampshire, it did not rise over life. It rose over stillness. Birds circled but did not land. Dogs howled until their throats gave out. The air itself felt contaminated not just with poison, but with something heavier, something spiritual. Amir stood at the center of the empty square, staring at the bodies. "Is this justice?" she asked. Vanessa didn't answer. Madeline knelt beside a child lying face down near a fountain. She turned the small body over gently. The girl's eyes were still open. Julia closed them. Here is the first question I want you to consider, my friends. When the oppressed become powerful, do they seek justice, or do they become the mirror of what harmed them? The demon Tevrash had not left. Not truly. He lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. He did not need to speak aloud. His voice now lived inside their thoughts. "You are free," he whispered, "and freedom without morality is the purest form of power." They walked the streets for hours. No screams, no resistance, no consequences. And that is when the fear began. Not fear of the demon, not fear of punishment, fear of themselves. Because when you have destroyed everyone who wronged you, who are you afterward? The pact deepens. The book had not lied. They had sold their souls. But selling something so abstract has consequences that reveal themselves slowly. Amir was the first to notice it. She tried to cry, but no tears came. She felt sorrow intellectually, but not emotionally. Vanessa could no longer feel warmth. Fire didn't burn her. Sunlight didn't comfort her. Madeline's reflections stopped appearing in mirrors. And Julia began hearing whispers beneath the whispers, voices deeper than Tevrash, ancient things that spoke of cycles, of balance, of correction. Tevrash appeared to them again that night, not as a beast, but as a tall, shadowed figure with too many joints in his fingers and eyes like collapsed stars. "You have tasted sovereignty," he said, "but sovereignty is addictive." Amir stepped forward. "What happens now?" The demons smiled without lips. "Now you decide what kind of gods you wish to be." The philosophy of corruption. Here is another question for you. If morality is created by the powerful and you eliminate the powerful, who defines morality next? The four women argued in the ruins of the Haldenrick estate. Madeline believed they should disappear. The world had already burned enough. Vanessa wanted to build something new, reshape society from the shadows. Amir wanted more destruction. "They all benefit," she said. "Even the innocent benefit from systems built on suffering." Julia remained quiet, and that silence was dangerous, because Julia had begun to understand something the others had not. The demon did not feed on blood. He fed on imbalance. By poisoning an entire city, they had tilted something cosmic. The scale had shifted violently, and nature, whether divine or demonic, always corrects itself. The spread of legend. Weeks passed. News of the dead city spread across the country. The government sealed it off. Priests called it divine punishment. Scientists blamed contaminated groundwater. No one blamed four forgotten women, but stories began circulating. Farmers near the forests claimed to see four silhouettes walking between the trees at dusk. Travelers spoke of wells turning black overnight. A preacher swore he saw a woman standing at the back of his church who cast no shadow. And slowly, a name formed in whispers: the Mothers of the Pit. Why mothers? Because destruction, my friends, is a form of creation. They had birthed something new into the world, fear without explanation. The breaking point. One night, Julia walked alone into the woods. Tevrash followed. "You regret," the demon observed. "I question," Julia corrected. "Regret is the beginning of weakness." Julia stopped walking. "Are we free? Or are we simply your instruments?" The forest went silent. The demon's shape flickered, stretching impossibly tall. "You summoned me." "Yes," Julia said, "but you wanted to be summoned." Silence again. Here is the darkest thought of all. What if evil does not force itself upon the world, but waits patiently for the broken to invite it in? Julia returned to the others with a warning. "We are not masters. We are catalysts." Amir grew angry. "Do you wish to return to chains?" Vanessa hesitated. Madeline looked at the sky as if searching for a god who had never answered her before. The second corruption. Tevrash began influencing them differently. Amir's anger intensified until it felt righteous. Vanessa became charismatic, unnaturally persuasive. Madeline could see people's fears as faint shadows around their bodies. Julia could see outcomes, and what she saw terrified her. If they continued, entire regions would fall, wars would spark, paranoia would spread like infection, humanity would collapse not from poison, but from distrust. The demon did not want a massacre. He wanted instability, because instability sustains him longer than extinction. Dead cities are silent, but frightened civilizations scream for generations. A final decision. The four gathered one last time near the poisoned wells. "We can end this," Julia said, "but it will cost us." "We already paid," Amir snapped. "No," Julia whispered. "We paid with our souls. Now we must pay with our existence." Madeline understood first. To rebalance the scale, the source of corruption must vanish. Not just physically, erased. Tevrash laughed when he realized their plan. "You believe you can undo a contract?" Vanessa stepped forward. "No, but we can nullify its effect. They held hands, 4 former slaves, 4 self-made monsters, 4 almost gods, and they spoke the summoning incantation backward. The ground split. The sky darkened. Tevrash roared not in pain but in fury. The ritual did not destroy him. It anchored him, bound him beneath the very earth where they had once slept as prisoners. But binding him required an eternal seal, a living seal. The women did not disappear. They descended into the pit, forever holding the demon in place. The aftermath. New Hampshire slowly recovered. Another town rose years later, careful to rename itself. The forests remained thick. The old wells are sealed. But sometimes, my friends, on windless nights, you can hear 4 voices beneath the soil, not whispering for revenge, but chanting in resistance, holding something down, holding something back. And here is the final question I leave you with. Were they villains? Or were they the only ones willing to pay the full price of their rage? Because society rejected them, the wealthy enslaved them, the demon empowered them. But in the end, they chose sacrifice. And that is what makes the legend unsettling. Not that evil exists, but that sometimes evil is born from injustice. And sometimes it chooses to chain itself so the rest of us can remain free. Sleep carefully tonight, my friends, because the ground beneath you is not as silent as you think. Hello, my friends. 2 years passed. 2 years of quiet. The forests grew back over the poisoned soil. A new town rose where death once stood. Children played near sealed wells. Churches filled again. People convinced themselves that tragedy had been an accident. That's what humans do best. We forget, but beneath the earth, far below the roots and worms and buried bones, the chant never stopped. 4 voices, endless, holding something ancient in place, until one night the chanting faltered, not because the mothers of the pit weakened, but because the world above them had begun to rot again. The second invitation. You see, my friends, demons do not break free on their own. They are invited. Across town, 4 new women gathered in a basement apartment, different faces, different lives, but the same wounds, exploited by employers, mocked online, abandoned by systems meant to protect them. Pain evolves, but it never disappears. Their names were whispered across social media forums and forgotten corners of the internet. They found fragments of an old manuscript, digitized pages from something historians called a myth, the Maw of Tevrash. They thought it was fiction. They thought it was empowerment. They thought revenge would taste like freedom. And so they repeated the words, not knowing those words were echoes of a contract still active beneath their feet. The ground trembled. Deep below, the original 4 felt the shift. Amir screamed for the first time in 2 years. Vanessa's grip weakened. Madeline saw cracks forming in the dark. Julia understood immediately. He's being called again. And then the seal broke. The escape. Tevrash did not rise gently this time. He exploded upward in a wave of psychic force that knocked out power grids across the state. Animals fled. Electronics fried. The sky above the town turned the color of bruised flesh. The new women collapsed as the demon stood before them, taller, sharper, more defined than before. "You have summoned me," he said, his voice vibrating inside their skulls. But something was different. He was no longer starving. He had fed for 2 years on suppressed anger worldwide, on injustice streamed in real time, on viral cruelty, on isolation. He was stronger. And the original mothers, they were released, not as humans, but as fractured spirits, shadows bound to the earth. For the first time since their pact, they felt something unexpected. Hope. The confrontation. The 4 spirits appeared before the new women. Amir spoke first. "Do not repeat our mistake." The younger women trembled. "You freed yourselves," one whispered. "No," Vanessa said. "We imprisoned ourselves." Tevrash laughed. "Listen to them, martyrs pretending to be saviors. Here is the truth, my friends. Evil rarely appears monstrous. It appears logical." Tevrash offered the new mothers power exposure of corrupt officials, financial ruin of abusers, influence over systems. But it will not stop there, Julia warned. The demon's smile widened. "Of course not." The final philosophy. Madeline stepped forward, her form flickering like smoke. Tevrash feeds on imbalance, not justice, not revenge. Imbalance. The new women hesitated. And here is the question that determines everything. If you are given the power to destroy what hurt you, can you stop once it's gone? The demon extended his hand. The air grew heavy. The sky darkened further. The new mothers looked at the old ones, 4 figures who had once poisoned a city, 4 figures who had once chosen destruction, and then chosen sacrifice. One of the new women lowered her hand. "We don't want to become you," Amir nodded slowly. "Then don't." The true defeat, Tevrash roared, not because he was attacked, but because he was denied. Demons thrive on agreement, consent, invitation. The new mothers stepped back. They refused the pact, and something extraordinary happened. Tevrash began to shrink, because without willing vessels, without broken souls surrendering themselves, he had no anchor. The original 4 joined hands once more, not in chains this time, but in unity. Julia spoke the incantation again, but this time it was not backward. It was transformed. Not a summoning, a rejection, a refusal. The words burned through the air like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Tevrash howled as the imbalance corrected, not through destruction, but through choice. And then he fractured, not sealed, not imprisoned, unmade. The ground stilled. The sky cleared. Silence returned. Freedom. The original mothers felt warmth for the first time in years. Amir wept. Vanessa felt the sun. Madeline saw her reflection return in a shard of broken glass. Julia closed her eyes and saw nothing. No dark outcomes. No catastrophic futures. Just possibility. Their souls, once sold, were no longer bound. Because here is the final truth, my friends. A contract requires 2 parties, and when one side ceases to exist, the contract dissolves. The original 4 began to fade not into darkness, but into light. Not erased, released. Amir smiled. "Let us finally rest," Vanessa whispered. "Let them build something better." Madeline exhaled softly. Julia looked at the new women. "Break cycles," she said. "Don't become them." And then they were gone. The legend changes. The town never knew how close it came to falling again. But the story shifted. No longer a tale of vengeance. Now it's told as a warning and a lesson. The mothers of the pit were once monsters, then martyrs. Now they are remembered as something far more complex. Proof that pain can create destruction, but choice can end it. So if you ever hear whispers beneath the earth, listen closely. If they sound angry, be careful. But if they sound calm, it means the cycle has been broken. And for the first time in this story, my friends, everyone is finally free. Sleep well,